Rebag, your premier destination for luxury resale. Elevate your style with our curated collection of bags, watches, and fine jewelry. At Rebag, quality is our priority. Each piece meticulously vetted and verified by experts, ensuring your investment is nothing short of perfection. Buy and sell finds from the world's top brands, including Hermes, Chanel, and Cartier. Access expertly crafted and hard-to-find pieces that redefine luxury. Your next investment awaits at Rebag. Get 10% off your first purchase with code REBAG10. That's 10% off the luxury you deserve. Don't miss out. Head to Rebag.com and enter code REBAG10 at checkout. That's REBAG10.
Hey, true crime fans. Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free true crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free true crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Hello and welcome to 31 Days of Terror, day number 19. And I have 4 spooky stories for you today. And the last story comes from the 22nd of September 2024. Now listen, okay? The dating system is over. It's done with. We're not keeping up anymore. I've had to move episodes around. I've realised today that I did not record episode number 19, even though I've recorded all of the other episodes. So the dates are going to be tricky. If you're here on the 22nd of September and you're thinking, hang on, I sent in a story and it hasn't been read yet, don't even worry about it, because there's been a lot of jumping around. So if I get to day 31 and you hear a date and you think, hang on, I sent my story in before that date, then get in contact with me. But for now, there's no rhyme nor reason, okay? We're moving around at warp speed here. And story number 1 today comes from Hanna. I live in beautiful Wicklow and frequently walk with a friend, Sandra, who won't mind me mentioning her name because she is a listener too. The woods that we walk in are not really open to the public. And even if they were, most sane members of the public wouldn't choose to walk there on account of it being on the grounds of an open prison. The woods are used for deer and pheasant hunting. But luckily we know the gamekeeper who looks after the woods. So as long as we don't go in on hunt days or let our dogs kill the pheasants, we've been given the okay to walk there. The woods are beautiful, but there are a few creepy spots. There are a few overgrown ruins of little old houses. You wouldn't see them unless you knew where to look. I actually think they are quite idyllic, but I can see why they would be a bit spooky too. There is one spot in the woods that sometimes affects Sandra, makes her come over a little weird. On one walk she said that it felt like someone actually walked through her, rather her than me. The woods are also hilly, really bloody hilly, as it runs alongside and down to a river, and it's on one of these hills that my experience occurred. The last hill on the route that we take is super steep. We make a joke walking up the hills that we are going to stop to look for buzzards. Really, we just don't want our lungs to explode, so we stop for a breather. This hill, although steep, is quite short, maybe 50 metres, to where it veers around to the right and levels off. The path does continue up further if you don't turn right, but it is a much lesser path and overgrown with thick shrub either side. On this walk around the middle of June last year, I had not brought my beloved Labrador Barney, as he had recently been treated for kennel cough and seemed a bit off. I didn't think he would cope well in the heat, so I left him at home. Sandra and I came up on the hill, affectionately known as the Bastard Hill, and at the halfway point we stopped to look for buzzards. I was facing up the hill for the breather and Sandra was facing down. We were having a chat when behind her I saw a huge black dog walking across the path just past where it veers off to the right. It reminded me of our friend Eilish's dog, Shadow, who was a huge black German Shepherd. I know Eilish won't mind a mention either, as she's also a listener. It came from the thick shrub on the left to the thick shrub on the right and was gone. I casually said, "Oh look, there's a dog," like it was the most normal thing in the world. Sandra has been walking in the woods a lot longer than me and was a bit surprised that there were any dogs other than our own in the woods. We raced up around the corner to where the shrub opens up onto a large area with much fewer trees and shrubs. There was no dog to be seen anywhere, or an owner. Sandra noted that it was weird that she hadn't heard the dog going between the hedges. We went back to look and there was no evidence of a dog having walked through the hedges. You'd expect some disruption, wouldn't you? And some noise? We shrugged it off and went on our way, assuming it must have just been a dog that outwitted us. We did joke that it was a ghost dog and named it Merlin. We name the deer that we meet in the woods too. We're not crazy, honest. Anyway, we checked in with the gamekeeper later that day, who knows the woods like the back of his hand. He practically lives in there and knows any of the dogs that are walked in the woods, of which there are very few, and also knows the routes that they would be on. He was quite adamant that there have been no wolf-sized black dogs in the woods, and that the path it was on would not be anywhere that anyone would be walking. He knows the houses around the woods, and knows that there are no black dogs belonging to any of the residents. I know it would be very easy to write this off as just a stray dog in the woods, and that's exactly what I would do, except for what happened next. At this point, I hadn't heard of the Black Shuck, which is surprising considering it most closely associates with East Anglia, where all of my family live. I soon learnt about the lore after I began Googling to see if black ghost dog had any relevance or meaning. It does, of course. Unfortunately, it is an omen of death. Remember how I told you about my dog Barney? He died exactly 1 week after seeing Ghost Dog in the woods. He wasn't old. He was put to sleep 2 days after his second birthday. Turns out that kennel cough was actually juvenile lymphoma, which had been caught too late. It was one of the hardest things saying goodbye to him, but I can honestly say that he had the best days of his short life being walked in those woods. So that's my experience. And for the record, I'm a rational woman, married, kids, professional career. I identify as a 29-year-old, but I might be a smidge older. I'm sure there could be a very rational explanation and coincidental timing. But on the other hand, maybe the Black Shuck came to give me a warning. I guess you'll have to make your own minds up about that one. Hannah, I love this story. I mean, it goes without saying that losing your pet is horrendous. We all know that. So obviously I don't love that part of the story, and I'm very sorry for the loss of your dog. It's an incredibly difficult thing, but it is also very comforting, and I know this from experience, like you said with Barney, to be able to look at his life and say, look, he had the best 2 years, the best short life, walking in the woods all the time and being loved. So that is something to take comfort from. And when you live in a community like that, where, you know, people are out in the woods and there's only a few people who are walking dogs in the woods, and you've got a small, relatively tight-knit community, you know all the local dogs. And when a dog rocks up that is a stray dog in the woods, everybody knows about it, and people will immediately try and find that dog's owner from experience. And look, people are going to see a giant wolf-like black dog because they're going to be thinking, where did this come from? Who owns this dog? Why is it wandering around unattended? Is it dangerous? Is it going to kill livestock? Is it going to hurt other dogs? Like, there would be questions to be asked. And these stories of black dogs, these black shucks, these creatures that are omens of death, exist all over the UK and Ireland. They are really prevalent pieces of folklore. And listen, maybe it is true. Maybe they are an omen of death. Maybe it was something that was linked to the land, and because you and Barney and your friend Sandra had spent so much positive, happy time on that land, that Barney had maybe, developed some sort of connection to it, and therefore the omen appeared to warn you because of that connection. And our second story today comes from Rachel. When I was a little girl, I lived in a haunted house. The house was in a historic area, which meant it was a fairly poor area, but beautifully built Victorian houses lined the street. I can remember many spooky things happening, but I'll share a few specific incidents to give you an idea of what life was like there. As a child, I would always feel something watching me, that feeling of eyes on your back. Sometimes I would catch glimpses of dark blurs swishing away around the corner or by the door frame. I could never see clearly what had just been there. I recall a time when I was lying in bed sleeping. I was around 9 years old and I had long hair. I would always drape my hair over my pillow when I was sleeping to keep my neck cool. I remember waking up with the feeling that there was someone in the room. In the dark, I could make out the fact that my closet door, which was directly across from my bed, was now cracked open, and I knew I had left it tightly shut. The feeling of oppression became overwhelming, and I sat up halfway to start to get out of bed. I was about to dash out of bed and I yelled, "Ma!" But before I could finish yelling Mom, something pulled me back down by my hair. I was flat against the bed and screaming louder for my mom and being held by my hair. Within 35 seconds, my mom was in the room and she flicked the lights on instantly. The pulling stopped and I was crying and flung myself into my mom's arms. I was terrified, and I slept in my mom's room for the next few weeks after that. For the next while, I'd be sandwiched between my parents, so uncomfortable but safer, and lying in their bed, and my mom and I would both hear loud thumping coming from the attic. We'd lay there and listen as it thumped down one side and back again. It sounded like a ball bouncing back and forth. My dad claimed it was rats in the attic, and even went up there to set traps. But we never saw a mouse or a rat in his traps, and they remained empty, while the sounds continued for months with no explanation. Another time I remember was years later when I was 12. We were finally moving out of the house, and it was our last day there. I was so relieved because the activity had gotten crazy at that point. My parents were doing a furniture run with the van and taking the last bit of stuff to our new place, while I was at the empty house with my grandmother. We were clearing and finishing things up, and we finally got done. We sat down on the carpet to rest and wait for my parents to come back. My grandma was in her early 80s and she fell asleep easily. This time she fell asleep with her tiny portable TV in her hand and her back propped up by a quilt and the wall. I laid on the carpet flat and closed my eyes. This was the best we could do since all the furniture was gone. I suddenly got the feeling someone was there, someone else. I peeked with one eye to look at my grandma and she was still totally asleep. I heard a light shuffling sound to my opposite side and I shut my eye and I froze. Suddenly I could feel someone walk up to my side, like how the carpet indents when someone walks on it. I could feel 2 feet walk right up next to me and stand there. I was terrified and couldn't open my eyes. I laid there in terror, but motionless until my parents came back about 15 minutes later. I never felt it leave. When they pulled up and opened the door, I felt it was safe to look, and of course no one was there. I dashed out of the house to the car and I never looked back. I was so glad we were leaving. Good riddance. My mom did some research on the house and found it was built in the early 1900s and built on again multiple times with additions in 1916 and then again in 1938 and 1975. She had even found the original house plans and a photo from the 1938 version of the house. Lots of people lived there. I don't know how many died there. My dad was a hardcore skeptic, but he even admitted there was something in that house. He heard kids laughing, things got moved all the time, and inexplicable events would take place. My mom saw an apparition of half a man just the top half of an old man floating in the kitchen. She heard voices whispering as well. There were lots of incidents of objects being moved or just gone. Once we came home and the entire contents of our fridge were sitting on the countertop, arranged neatly, but sitting there melting with no explanation. The house energy felt heavy and my parents argued all the time. They got along better after we left, but I always wondered if it was the house giving them negative vibes or their negative vibes feeding the house. I'll never know. I had many issues with my closet door continuing to open every night, even after I'd pile up toys and shoes to block it shut. Cold spots, weird sounds, poltergeist activity, and it continued the entire time we lived there, which was 11 years. I've had a few other paranormal things happen to me since we left there, but nothing like that house. I don't think I'm particularly psychic or anything, but I am sensitive to energy. I can sense people's emotions and they impact me in a big way. The house is still standing to this day. It's been somewhat remodelled, and it's been purchased and sold a few more times since we left. Sometimes I wonder about contacting the owner and asking them if they've experienced anything, but I haven't gotten the nerve up to yet. Maybe one day I will. Oh, Rachel, I would totally want to know as well. I'd be like, I need to know if it continued. I need to know if it stopped. I totally understand the curiosity. This is wild. Like having something grab you by the hair and yank you back onto the pillow in the middle of the night. What the fuck? That is so incredibly violent and so aggressive. Like, what was the goal here? And I often think about this in terms of hauntings. Like, is the goal to communicate something? Is the goal, like poltergeist activity, to be mischievous, to get attention, to disrupt the family? Is the goal to send a message? Is there no goal? It's just a residual energy. You know, that's often how I think about hauntings. But in this instance, like, is the goal to hurt you? Is the goal to terrify you? Because why else would it grab you by the hair and hold you down? Like, were you not meant to wake up and call for your ma? Do you know, was that not meant to happen? And therefore this entity, I don't know, panicked and grabbed you by the hair? It's just so violent. And then to hear those thumping sounds up in the attic, it reminds me of the Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons. Sinead from The Poisoner's Cabinet and I were talking about this only the other day, and there is an episode where Bart has an evil twin called Hugo that lives in the attic, and it used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid. I was so frightened of Hugo in the attic. Honestly, it's really, really scared me, and that's what this reminds me of. What the heck was in the attic bouncing around? And I wonder if all of the renovations are the reason why your mum saw the apparition of half a man. Like maybe the floor was in a different place, or the kitchen was a different room at one point, and that's why she saw half a man. You know, from his era, he would have been standing on the floor, but in her era, you know, he's obviously seems to be standing lower down, first of all. They do say that renovations in houses can disrupt spirits, etc. So maybe the amount of renovations in the house had caused spirits to be stirred up or spirits to hang around. Either way, it sounds like there was so much going on in this house.
Hey, true crime fans. Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free true crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free true crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Hey there. Looking to level up your shopping experience? Let me introduce you to Amazon Live. If you haven't heard, it's a shoppable video experience where influencers and creators showcase the latest must-haves all while you shop in real time. And for those who love some celeb gossip, reality stars like Kyle Richards, Lala Kent, and friend of the pod, Paige DeSorbo. On her new show, In Bed with Paige DeSorbo, Paige invites top-tier guests to cozy up in her fluffy bed where they spill secrets, share nighttime routines, and even whip up midnight snacks. Stream and shop new episodes of her series In Bed with Paige DeSorbo every Tuesday at 7 p.m. ET by going to amazon.com/live/Paige_DeSorbo. Or you can watch Amazon Live's new live TV channel on Freevee or Prime Video under the DIY section and shop along on your phone.
Rebag, your premier destination for luxury resale. Elevate your style with our curated collection of bags, watches, and fine jewelry. At Rebag, quality is our priority. Each piece meticulously vetted and verified by experts, ensuring your investment is nothing short of perfection. Buy and sell finds from the world's top brands, including Hermes, Chanel, and Cartier. Access expertly crafted and hard-to-find pieces that redefine luxury. Your next investment awaits at Rebag. Get 10% off your first purchase with code REBAG10. That's 10% off the luxury you deserve. Don't miss out. Head to Rebag.com and enter code REBAG10 at checkout. That's REBAG10.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dive into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change?
In each episode, we chat with executives and changemakers across industries.
We're here to share everything we know and actually figure it all out.
Though it hurts sometimes, we found the secret to great organizations is the truth works. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And story number 3 comes from Tony. When I was younger, around 10 or 11, my dad used to take my sister and I to martial arts classes in the evenings. The classes were in another town which was about 25 minutes away. I know the drive well and took it many times as a kid. I've driven it countless times as an adult as well. For the sake of set and setting, this is Northern California, in the Northern Bay Area. The drive winds through the bottom of a valley in wine country, so it's rather rural. There's mostly vineyards, hills, mountains, and little ranch and farmhouses sprinkled about. At night, it's dark. There's no streetlights. Only the headlights of cars and the occasional exterior lights of the few houses along the way. One night, while driving back home, I was sitting in the back seat. My dad was driving and my sister was in the front passenger seat. I was looking out the window to the east, where there is a mountain that is sparsely populated. At night, it was all just darkness. As I was looking out the window, I saw something I have never seen before or since anywhere. It stood out clearly among the darkness of the sky above the mountain. A red triangle. It wasn't a solid red triangle, it was a red outline of a triangle. As if you took a black sheet of paper and painted in glowing red the outline of a perfect equilateral triangle, with the tip pointing down towards the ground and the base to the sky. Relative to the mountain and the distance, in the area which I know well, it was about the size of a large house. It was in no way a reflection of any of the lights in the car. You know how the emergency lights button on the car is a red triangle? I know this because there was nothing that had casted that reflection, and I could see it in the sky above the mountain. I watched silently for about 6 to 8 seconds, which was the amount of time from when I spotted it to when it was gone. It moved slowly, and I watched it descend at a slow and steady speed. It then continued to descend behind the horizon of the mountain. I watched the tip slowly go behind the mountain, followed by the rest of it. Behind that mountain to the east is nothing for miles and miles. There's no airports, no cities, and I've lived in this area all my life. I know the flight paths of planes. I know what conventional aircraft look like in the sky. There are no military bases, and I've never seen anything like it. And I've always remembered it. I was in the military for 12 years and deployed to Poland beginning in late 2017. In early 2018, in January, I was able to take a trip to the city of Torun. It's one of the oldest establishments in Poland, spared from the devastation of the 20th century wars. One of the many attractions of the city is the ruins of the castle of the Teutonic Knights. It's an old brick structure, elaborate but degraded over 800 years. At ground level, it's just a maze of walled brick squares that you meander through. There's no roof, just brick walls. It was cold that morning, about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I paid the admission fee at the entrance booth and started exploring. I realised I was the only person there. It felt a little strange and lonely. Maybe I just felt a little strange and lonely. After walking through the castle grounds and reading whatever plaques I could that were in English, I saw that there was a staircase that led down under the castle. This wasn't some Scooby-Doo, let's go check this out situation. The underground area is accessible to guests and contains more exhibits and information. I will include a photo of this entrance so you can see how fucking creepy it is. So I went down the stairs, down into the castle keep. Down there was a dining table, a mock-up of how it may have looked, suits of armour and plaques with some information. I realised that this underground keep only had one way in and one way out, the stairs. At the innermost portion of the keep, past the table, was an even smaller tunnel-like area room, gated off with wrought iron bars. The dungeon. I saw the dungeon and knew it was there from the moment I entered the keep. But for some reason I pretended I didn't. I was scared of it. I tried to ignore it. I snapped some pictures of other stuff down there. The table, the suits of armour, but I didn't want to take a picture of the dungeon. I didn't want to look at the dungeon. At the same time, I was mindful of my own irrational fear and felt embarrassed of myself, alone, in an 800-year-old castle, for not just going towards the dungeon to check it out, so I did. I walked up to the bars and looked in. That's when I felt a touch on my back, a significant touch on my left shoulder blade. It was a deliberate and noticeable touch. Fast pressure on that single point. It wasn't a spasm or a cramp of any kind. I know what those feel like. I know my body very well and know exactly where, when, and under which conditions those would occur, and it's never my back. I was wearing a shirt, a sweatshirt, and a leather jacket. I instinctively turned around to see nothing but the empty castle keep. I made my way up the stairs and out of the castle. That was the only time I've ever experienced anything that I would describe as ghostly, and as much as I'd rather figure out how it all works once I'm dead, this experience really made me wonder. I am going to post Tony's pictures from the castle on social media. They will be on Patreon, Instagram and Facebook. There's nothing ghostly in them. There's nothing, there's no claims of anything ghostly in them, but they are just cool pictures, so I thought it was worthwhile including them. So going back to the red triangle story, I actually think that seeing a triangle is common in the world of UFOs, or UAEs as they are called now. UAPs. I always say UAEs. That's the United Arab Emirates. Stop getting those things mixed up. So in the world of UAPs, seeing triangles is actually quite common. I don't think there's any good explanation for it. Like, I don't think anybody has said, yes, you've seen that red triangle. That's actually this military thing, or that is this reflection of lights. But it is something that is seen quite commonly. And I just think there is loads of shit going on in the sky that we don't know about, that we don't understand. I don't know what it is. I'd like to think it wasn't aliens, to be really frank. But I do think there is weird stuff that happens in the sky. And, you know, we see aircraft in the sky all the time. We see the way aircraft move. We see satellites moving across the sky. We see meteorites. We see shooting stars. We see all those things regularly. A perfectly equilateral red outline of a triangle? That's weird. And as for the castle in Poland, honestly, there are times when I go and visit old castles, prisons, you know, all sorts of different things. And when you stand there and you really think about the fact that for hundreds of years, people have stood in that same position. People have fought battles there. People have been tortured there, like in this case in the dungeon. It's crazy to think about. And you can't help but think there must be so much energy left behind, so much emotion left behind, so much big feelings, fear, anger, anxiety, love, all of those things. They must have an impact on a place, right? And obviously, instinctively, you knew that the dungeon was not the place that you wanted to be looking at or going towards. And I would probably do the same thing, where I'd be like, oh, get over yourself, like you're fine, just go and look at the dungeon and get on with it. But obviously there was something there that wanted to make itself known to you. And maybe because there was nobody else there and you were the only tourist in the castle at that particular time, it was the perfect opportunity for whatever energy to be noticed. Maybe it was somebody who had been in the dungeon and died. I'm giving lots of maybes in today's episode. There's maybes galore. And story number 4 comes from Christina. My experiences started in my childhood home. It was built by my grandfather in the 80s. It's a 2-story home with a kitchen on the first floor and a kitchen on the second floor. This is common in Italian-Canadian homes. I only mention this because I can remember as a child having to walk down the hallway past the dining room to get to my bedroom, and it always felt creepy. The lot the house was built on was once owned by the neighbour Henry. He passed away in his driveway, our backyard, a long time ago. The people who lived in Henry's house said he was a poltergeist, doing the usual kitchen cabinets opening, cutlery being thrown, and lights operating on their own. I remember being told that Henry doesn't come around kids, but it just made me fear growing up. When would Henry decide to show himself? My parents would play the odd joke of blaming Henry for the creaks and bangs that the house would make, which only fueled the fear in me. Surprisingly, when odd things did happen, like my hair being tugged while I was lying down reading my book, or my stereo turning on or off on its own, a chill would run through me, initially thinking Henry, but I would quickly explain it away. I'm not sure how old I was exactly, but I was definitely in high school. I guess old enough that Henry didn't have to worry about scaring me. I stayed up late chatting with my friends on MSN, a typical teen night. When it reached 10 p.m, I called it a night and snuck upstairs in the dark not to wake my family. I don't remember if the dining room bothered me that night, but it usually did. My room was at the end of the hall. When I reached it, I opened the door as quietly as possible. I crept in the room and turned to shut the door as gently as possible to not wake my sleeping sister. When I turned around to walk to my bed, not even an arm's length in front of me stood a shadow figure. It stood slightly taller than I am, and it was darker than the room, but not opaque. My reflex was to throw myself at the light switch. The second the light filled the room, the figure in front of me was gone. I looked over at my sleeping sister, unaffected by the loud bang and the bright light. With adrenaline pumping, I paused to think of what just happened. There is a vanity mirror in front of me. Maybe I just saw myself. Maybe it was a trick of the street lamp light shining in through the bedroom window. I turned the bedroom light on and off a few times to see if I could recreate what I thought I saw. I could not explain it. All I can say is, I know my brain thought it saw something because the way I jumped at the light switch, my body was in autopilot. Again with the hair pulling, can we not do that, please? Add that to the list of things that entities should not be doing to young girls. Hair pulling is not the one. I can only imagine in this instance that it was like, a sort of a playful tug rather than our earlier story of being, dragged down to the pillow by the hair. But I guess, obviously this place was important to Henry and he passed away in the driveway, but maybe it wasn't him at all. Maybe it was something else. And I respect the kind of, not showing himself to kids because he doesn't want to scare the kids, blah, 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 blah. But also, it's pretty fucking scary in general if you're sharing the house with a poltergeist who's opening cabinets and cutlery being thrown around and lights going on and off on their own and hair being pulled and parents going, oh, that creak and bang in the house. Oh, it's just Henry. Don't worry about it. And let's be fair, he didn't wait that long. You're a teenager when he shows himself to you, if this is Henry. So he didn't really wait that long. It's not like he waited until you were a grown adult and then was like, oh, okay, now it's okay to show myself because, it won't terrify her anymore. Henry, I respect that you want to hang around, all right? I respect that this was your home. But maybe don't terrify people into oblivion. And I think it's really interesting, Christina, that your reflex was immediately to turn on the light. Like your body and your brain reacted before you even had time to realise what was happening. Which just goes to show that you saw something. Something was there. And the fact that you tried and you were unable to recreate it is also really interesting. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, day number 19 of 31 Days of Terror. Thank you to Hanna, Rachel, Tony and Christina for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 22nd of September, but just disregard that, okay? Until we get to the last day, until we get to day 31, then take a note of the date. And then you'll know the accurate date of where we're up to. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
As dawn broke over the seven seas, the pirates of the Crimson Galleon set sail for adventure. But there was one problem: paperwork. Mountains of it. Filing, invoices, you name it.
This work ain't fit for a pirate.
Luckily, their captain had an idea. She used the smart buying tools on Amazon Business, so they could work more efficiently and get back to doing what they do best. I know, right? Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.